winds and heavy rain forecast for the coming hours. It's the sixth storm to hit the country in recent months. There are now fears of further flooding. In a moment we'll have a report from Athlone, where residents continue to deal with the deluge there. But first let's cross over to our reporter Joe McGreely. Joe.
Yes, Vivian, for the last 7 hours, Storm Frank has been lashing the southern and western coasts with very heavy rainfall and very strong winds, and that is continuing tonight. Even here in this part of Galway City, you can see that there's sheets of rain falling down behind us here around the docks. Now, Met Éireann's orange weather warnings are remaining in operation tonight for both wind and rain, and they will be in operation until tomorrow. Now, earlier this evening, one of the big worries was how the storm would affect the high tide, which came just before 8 o'clock here in Galway. And the fear was, of course, that waves would be driven ashore by the strength of the winds and cause some flooding. And as we can see now, that did happen in Salt Hill, just west of the city. High tide in Galway was just before 8 p.m. and driven by the strong winds brought by Storm Frank, waves crashed over the promenade wall in Salt Hill, flooding car parks and adjacent roads that remain closed to traffic. Earlier in the day, when the winds were still relatively light, City Council staff and civil defence personnel sandbagged businesses and homes in the area in anticipation of these waves.
We're trying to get ready for this Storm Frank and just to get some of the premises here secure. I hope we have enough.
Even as the winds strengthened, some walkers were still getting their exercise in.
Would you like fresh air? Loving it's free. Not a bit, it's lovely.
One man even took a dip in the sea. But by mid-afternoon, conditions had deteriorated further, and even walking was hazardous. The strongest wind recorded was in Valencia, County Kerry, where it gusted to 110 kilometres per hour. But Met Éireann's orange wind warning for the west and south remains in place tonight. There have also been warnings of a stronger storm coming tomorrow on the coattails of Frank.
There's going to be, if you like, a sting in the tail. There's going to be a small window of very, very strong winds and a brief spell of heavy rain from a secondary area of low pressure, which is going to run up along the west coast tomorrow morning.
Meanwhile, in many areas of the country, there are fears that the rain tonight will greatly worsen flooding that is already affecting many people and homes.
As the last winter storm moved in, residents at Golden Island and Carrick O'Brien near Athlone rallied once again to try and protect their homes from the Shannon floods.
Well, we're trying to stay in the house, basically. We don't want to leave it.
This is going to be here for another month. Even if the levels start to drop, these people will still be more or less trapped in their house, where we've had to come through 2 or 3 foot of water and attracted to actually access their house.
For horse trainer Tom Cleary, the damage has already been done. He is putting his losses at tens of thousands of euros.
Simon Harris hasn't come down to see how bad things are down here. Our Taoiseach has not come near us. We've been completely ignored. Absolutely no help. There was supposed to be some aid to help us to get back after this flood, but I've applied for that now to find out that I don't qualify.
It was water being pumped from a bog into the river that's annoying farmers along the Shannon at Clonfert in County Galway today.
We're here at the Bordnamona bog in East Galway, where there are 2,500 acres of a dry bog, and Bordnamona continue to pump the water out into the River Shannon. And we're pleading with Bordnamona today to turn off those pumps and allow some of the water that's in the Shannon system into this bog and other Clough bogs.
Bordnamona said today the amount of water being pumped from the bogs is inconsequential in the context of the overall level of flooding on the Shannon system. And this evening the Taoiseach issued a statement saying he has already visited flooded areas of County Mayo and is being kept fully abreast of the national situation.
People are up in arms and at the end of their tether in relation to the state of the roads. When you see bus companies saying that they are thinking twice about collecting children because of the state of the roads and the damage that's been done to their buses, it's time to sit up and take notice, and this government hasn't done so heretofore. It's near time they did so.
And tonight, as the storm hit, Lochry Sub-Aqua Club divers were assisting in a search on the Shannon for a car that ended up in the water amidst high wind and gusts in County Roscommon. Ciara Malooly, RTE News, Athlone.
Well, Joe McGreely is still with us. Joe, would it be fair to say at this stage that the worst is yet to come?
Well, Vivian, Met Éireann are saying that the winds, the immediate winds we're feeling at the moment, will abate as the night goes on. But as you heard in the report there is a second storm going to come in tomorrow in the wake of Storm Frank, and that's due tomorrow morning. Now, that's going to be of shorter duration, but Met Éireann are forecasting that the winds could in fact be stronger than what we felt today. One other thing in relation to power cuts, we know that thousands of homes have lost power during the day because of the storm, and ESB crews have been out repairing and getting supply back, but even as they did, others were being cut off. So tonight there's about 5,000 homes without power, and the ESB estimate that around 1,500 of those will probably not get their power back until tomorrow morning.
All right, Joe McGreely in Galway, thank you. Well, Britain.
The country in the wake of the latest storm, Storm Frank. The government's task force has warned that river levels are expected to rise further in the coming days. Thousands of homes and businesses are without electricity, and many roads are closed. Flooding is more widespread than it was before Christmas, with counties that were not affected in recent weeks now being impacted, particularly in the southeast, where Enniscorthy and Graignamanagh were among the towns badly hit. Our first report tonight is from our southeast correspondent, Damien Tiernan.
What are you going to do?
Cry.
People in the medieval town of Graignamanagh after the worst flood in decades. Total carnage here, like.
It's utter devastation. We have absolute devastation in the town of Graignamanagh.
This was the water cascading down the main street last night before it got worse. At one stage, it was more than halfway up the shop fronts. By mid-morning, the floodwaters were only beginning to recede.
Locals here in Graignamanagh say that this is the worst flooding they've seen in 33 years. At one stage last night, the water was 5 feet high.
Shopkeepers and staff worked with fire crews to salvage as much as possible.
We're trying to save some of the businesses here, like, pumping of water.
No shop, no post office. Trucks of fresh food came from Cork this morning and just sent them back.
Everything in my house is gone, everything.
Over in Inistioge, the flooding has been unprecedented, and it's the same in Thomastown and other places. In Enniscorthy, the Slaney overflowed its banks, but there's no bailout for these businesses who dream of the day the proposed flood defence systems are installed. In Cork, up to 80 businesses were flooded in Bandon and Middleton, such as Shortens, flooded for a second time in a month.
As you can see, it's not very pleasant.
In Middleton, soldiers helped evacuate families, 14 of whom were given free emergency accommodation in a local hotel.
And they were trying to check into rooms and pay for rooms. I got a call from the duty manager to let me know that it was our own community, our own neighbours. So I said, absolutely, we cannot, no charge.
Back in Enniscorthy, rescue dogs such as Rascal stayed at the water's edge. Water which could yet still rise slightly in the coming 12 hours. Damien Tiernan, RT News.
In the Midlands, water levels on the River Shannon are continuing to rise, and the battle to keep floodwater at bay goes on. 2 government ministers visited Athlone today to talk to some of the people affected. This report from Samantha Library.
Tractor and trailer are the only way to travel through Athlone's flooded farmland.
It's just risen more and more. We originally had just parked down there on the road, getting the transport box up here, but it's just got worse, to be honest, so we're just relying on all the locals.
2 government ministers navigated their way through the waters today to meet some of those affected.
I lost my son 13 years ago, so on Christmas Day I could not get to the graveyard. So,
yeah, and that's obviously something you do every year. Yeah.
Next week we're bringing together all the various different agencies across the country who have responsibility along the Shannon to come together to start planning in the medium term what we can all agree on to alleviate many of the issues that you see here today.
But the opposition asked where was the Taoiseach.
Many people have commented on that, and others have said that he just hasn't been out and about on the ground to experience the reality of what it is to be hit by flooding of this kind and by the storms and the damage that has been caused by the storms. I think you do need to get on the ground. The Taoiseach needs to get out there and meet people and engage with them.
The Taoiseach has visited a number of communities that have been hit by flooding in the west. He intends to visit more in the coming days, but it is very important that government and the Taoiseach don't just turn up for photo calls, and the Taoiseach is very determined not to do that, that they actually take action.
Today, the National Emergency Coordination Committee warned that weather problems could persist for at least 3 to 4 weeks.
Just because the rain may have stopped today, it doesn't mean that the rivers are going to immediately fall. They will continue to rise for a number of days. So we are still in a severe flood situation on the Shannon catchment and all of those other catchments I just mentioned. And so ongoing flood defence efforts will have to continue for some time to come.
Residents along the Shannon remain on high alert as river levels continue to rise. The advice to all those in flooded areas is to avoid walking along swollen riverbanks, not to drive in the dark, and not to swim or walk in coastal areas until conditions improve. Samantha Library, RTE News, Athlone.
South Galway, in particular, the area surrounding Gorts, has been affected badly by the flooding following Storm Frank. Our reporter Joe McGreely reports from there now.
Storm Frank may be gone, but the rain it dropped on the west of the country is not. All parts of County Galway were affected, but South Galway around Gort across to Lochray is very badly flooded. The army were out today in their military vehicles, capable of taking on the floodwater. These soldiers spent the day sandbagging homes as water levels continued to rise.
Well, it's come up about 6 inches overnight, and the reason it's rising so fast now is it has no place to go. 2 weeks ago it was flowing into the Lake and Cool, but the Lake and Cool is now backing up. The only solution for the whole of this area is to control the level of Cool Lake, and that needs to be drained into the Sea of Kilbarra.
The nearby Galway-Limerick Railroad remains closed due to the flooding, with locals estimating the water is 1.8 metres deep in places. Also closed at Ardrahan, the N18, the main Galway-Limerick road. Traffic is being diverted to the village. And this evening more sandbags were added to the barrier erected to protect adjacent homes. A few kilometres to the south is Thurballylee, once the summer home of poet William Butler Yeats. It was reopened with some fanfare last June, having been closed for years after a previous flood.
And that's where our tea rooms were, that's where our meetings were, that's where we had all our plays during the summer. So it's a disaster to look at it now, but the waters will go again, and we'll be back here again.
Joe McGreely joins us now live. Joe, good evening to you in County Galway. What's the situation where you are tonight?
Well, the situation is not improving, Ray. As we heard there, water levels are rising here in South County Galway and in many other places around the country. I'm standing here on the N18, which is closed to traffic and has been for a number of days. And I can tell you since 4:30, by looking at the markings on the road here, we can see the water levels have risen. In this area, not far from us here, 10 houses were flooded today, forcing some of the residents to leave. And of course, that is the threat that's hanging over many, many homes around the country. As we are told, the water levels will continue to rise, the rivers will continue to swell. And really, there's also growing frustration. There were demands here today for more government action, more immediate government action, and calls again for the Taoiseach to come down here and see for himself the type of flooding that is affecting people. And in something of a demonstration of the frustration, I can tell you that there was an attempt made not far from us here this evening by a number of individuals to try and drill through to an underground cave that is apparently in this area using a well drilling rig. Now, I don't know whether or not the effort was successful, whether or not sanction was required for that or permission was sought for that work, but it certainly did take place, and it does show you that people really do want to get some immediate action.
Very good, Joe McGreely in South County Galway for us this evening. Thank you, Joe.